The Jimmy Z Show.
All right, next on the Jimmy Z Show, I'm very happy to bring on Michael Stollaire. And some of you who've been listening for a long time will remember Michael from, it's been a little while. Welcome back to the Jimmy Z Show, Michael.
Thanks for having me back on, Jimmy. Glad to be here.
Now, I guess in general, we can describe your work as, in a broad and vague term, internet security. That's your specialty, is that correct?
Yeah, it's one of two specialties for my consultancy, but certainly one of my personal fortes. That's for sure.
All right. So with that in mind, I'm bringing you on because it's my opinion, and we talked a little bit off the air, but it's my opinion that these voting machines, the system of voting machines in America, is ripe for fraud, and that we would be much better off if we went back to paper ballots. But in spite of that, we could actually be safer voting online on a secured server than we would be trying to trust our vote to a voting machine we know nothing about.
Yeah, it would be far safer. The analogy that I would like to use is, I doubt that the people that are out there that are using smartphones like the one I'm talking on right now are going to be trading them in anytime soon for 2 Campbell soup cans with a string tied between them. I would say that if we're, taking our, culture in general in the first world into the 21st century, that I think that these procedures should be upgraded as well. The old procedures are certainly antiquated. I told you off the air that one of my past customers was Los Angeles County itself, and my enterprise management systems presided over the LA Vote kiosks, for instance. And none of us look forward to it because of the tremendous concerns we had about problems. And above and beyond that, I think that these systems, because of their security problems, and because that there's definitely a conflict of interest between certain unions that service these voting machines, that we would think that there would be about a 25% chance that something would blow up in our face is what it came down to. You're just asking for trouble.
Well, it would seem to me, now I talked a little bit on the show previously about calibration, and what they're talking about with calibration is like with your iPad or with your cell phone or a smartphone, you calibrate the screen so that you're touching the right place on the screen. And it seems to me that it would be very easy to miscalibrate a voting machine on purpose.
Yes. The chances of it happening are very, very slim.
Okay.
If there is a calibration problem with a voting machine, that's either a unit that needs to be put into the smelter, and turned into like a tin can, or somebody did it purposefully. I was saying earlier, I turned on the news today because I'm very interested in what's going to go on today in our election. The first thing I heard of was problems with machines, and earlier this week I was having a discussion with several of my colleagues about why we're not moving towards such a system. That if our banking systems that do business internationally, such as the Federal Reserve or the defense contractor clients that I do business with, are more than eager to move towards such systems and embracing the security that it brings and embracing the control that it brings and the standardization, I fail to see why our voting mechanism can't be brought, like I said, into the 21st century as well. It would make things far more secure, far more accurate, and we wouldn't have problems. We wouldn't be hearing in 2010 when Reed was running against Angle that there are power outages and the machines that just so happen to be calibrated and put in place by the SEIU are not reporting correct numbers. I think all of this can be put into the past very easily.
I was very frustrated with what happened in Nevada, and ultimately I just decided, well, if the Nevada Republican Party, which is the only entity that can really cause a stink there, decides not to cause a stink, then I'm not going to worry about it. But ultimately, the more that let's assume that some in the Democratic Party or some liberals or the SEIU, let's assume that somebody is messing around with the voting machines. The more they get away with it, the more they are allowed to do it, the more they're going to do it.
Yes. Now we're going back to, now you're going into another specialty of mine, my former major of psychology at Syracuse University and UCLA. which is if you allow somebody to do something and they get away with it, it does nothing more than reinforce their belief that they can continue to get away with it without any punishment. And the easiest way to move away from that is not necessarily to go punish these individuals, but by going from an abacus to a computer, I guess is the best way to put it. If you just leave the old way behind, move ahead to secured server system, using secure encryption technologies and what are known as digital certificates. It's the exact same system that you would use, that I use on my phone to pay my credit cards, to do my banking. I fail to see why the average person on the street would trust these types of transactions to this type of technology, but wouldn't be willing to use the same thing to vote. And the other thing I wanted to mention too, Jimmy, is one of the more stark realities is that about 50 to 60% on a good, election night are going to actually go out and vote. Can you imagine what the turnout percentage would be if this was available through your computer, your iPad, or your smartphone?
Oh, I think it would be great because
it's 90% plus.
When you
all you have to do is push a button.
Right. When someone registered to vote, they would have their registration set up online in their state at the Secretary of State's office, and you would have a login and a password. And on election day, or in states when you have early voting, you would have early voting dates. You go online, you log in, you make your vote, you lock it in, you save, and you're done. And you don't have to worry about some voting machine that if you press Romney, it bounces over to Obama. You're going to see on your screen exactly who you're voting for, and that takes care of that.
Right. There would have been no Florida debacle, in Florida, when Bush narrowly won that contest. You wouldn't have people, looking at ballots and wondering if somebody's penciled-in circle was one way or another. It would be accurate to the millionth percent,
Now,
real, you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Real quick here, before we close off, give us some examples of some of the very important things that are done online, because people are banking online, people buy and sell stocks online. We're not talking about flimsy little things anymore. These are very important, life-changing events that people trust the internet to.
Exactly. As long as the appropriate, as long you have to go under the assumption that somebody from an architectural standpoint and from a engineering standpoint is actually going to implement a system that has the right security controls. This is what we have to move forward, with a given as. But certainly, if there are people like me around, believe me, the individuals that are within governments that do the security for NORAD, for example, can easily do this for voting systems. And as long as that is rolled out in a concise and standardized fashion, the security associated with it would be of the same level as what I talked about previously. That's why I brought it up. I said, well, is somebody going to hesitate to do it because they're worried about security? No, because people like myself that are extremely attuned to security are using their phone to do their banking, are using their phone to make their car payments, are using their phone to handle their utilities. So there's nobody, if it was about 5-10 years back, I'd be somewhat concerned, because back then the security methods and the security technology that have come into play because of these problems, were not as mature. But in typical form, technology people like myself come into contact with issues like that, problems, and they begin to implement solutions so that, again, digital certificate technology, secure socket layer connections, these types of things are being used by my current clients. Most of my current clients are banking institutions and defense contractors. They would not be, trusting literally billions of dollars a day, whether it is, money, transactions that go internationally, or plans, for example, for weaponry to be sold to our defense department. They would never, ever trust these institutions, these methods, if it wasn't secure to the nth degree. So certainly it would be very simple and straightforward, very logical to move towards a technology-driven voting system. But with that being said, if all the logical proof states, it's hard to disagree with what we're talking about here, but it wouldn't be a good idea to do it. If there's no logical reason not to do it, then there must be some emotional or psychological reason why people aren't moving towards these types of systems. And it could be a fear. Go ahead.
Or political reason. Hello?
Right. Exactly, exactly. Some of it's fear, because the people that are, people occasionally kid about, and the older generation being most of our governmental representatives, and perhaps in that age group they would be hesitating to move towards technology of this caliber because they don't understand it fully. I think that that's, a certain percentage of it. But, like you just said, believe me, there's got to be reasons from a political standpoint, from the people who want to embrace fraud instead of technology. They don't want, they count on, 50 to 60% of the electorate to show up, and they want their people in their buses to show up, not 90+% of people that just need to push a button on their phone. These are the other reasons that they're not moving towards such a technology paradigm.
Yeah, and we could go into even more detail if you wanted to talk about people who are helping the deaf and the blind and the infirm and dragging them to a voting place and encouraging them along the way to vote the way they want them to vote. All of that goes out the window if someone is able to vote at home.
Exactly. And I believe that earlier this week a great example popped up about the provisional balloting that's taking place in Ohio, and it being done purposefully, 900,000 people putting in provisional ballots and then showing up at the place of voting to see, because they know that 10% of it's going to sneak through because it isn't being done with a secure system that's based on technology like we're talking about, and that allows 20% of the votes in this particular example to be fraudulent and count twice so that their candidate has a greater chance of winning. But in that provisional voting, a gentleman's name that I think we're all familiar with, he's a very infamous individual, Adolf Hitler, showed up in Ohio to vote. And when this type of thing occurs, Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, Walt Disney show up and suddenly vote in Ohio once, twice, maybe 5 times, we've got a big problem, and that problem needs to be solved.
Right, and the way to solve it, it seems to me, I knew I came to the right guy to bring on the show. It seems to me the way to solve it is a secured server on the internet.
Absolutely. It can be set up, like I said, to be clustered, failover design. Hurricane Sandy hits, and it doesn't matter. Because as long as you have an internet connection, there's another data center, like in an eBay type design, one of my past clients, right, that you've got a Colorado data center, you've got a New Jersey data center, something in the southeast, something on the west coast, so that if Hurricane Sandy hits the northeast and that blows out that data center, it automatically fails over with no human intervention, no human error. As soon as there's humans involved, like in Florida, you're going to have error. As soon as computers are involved that do not take under consideration emotional or psychological things when they make their decision-making, things flip over from the East Coast to the West Coast, and that same person that unfortunately faced a natural disaster in New Jersey can vote using the secure system that's in Los Angeles, California, just the same way as if it was in New Jersey.
If it was Governor Jimmy Z in California, and I wanted to hire you and a team of specialists to set this up for could we have it set up by the 2014 election to have everyone who has an internet connection, everyone who needs to go to a library and use an internet connection, could we have it set up for the 2014 election?
What we're talking about in its, in the first phase of this type of implementation, we'll just, assume it's based on like what I did for Santa Barbara Bank and Trust, right down the street from both of us. That this type of system, from not only a Californian perspective, in your gubernatorial scenario, could be rolled out within 6 to 12 months with the right people and enough resources. And the monetary savings, not that people want to save money in government today, right? But if they wanted to save a lot of money and a lot of hassle, again, 6 to 12 months. And this system would be in place, testable data along the way. This is not, a far-reaching guess. This is based on projects that I've been involved with in the past. For example, the online commerce department of Walt Disney. I was involved with that in Orlando and in Burbank, and what was known as Buena Vista Pictures, now Walt Disney Pictures in London. 6 to 9 months in that e-commerce site. These same types of systems were in place. And believe me, Walt Disney does not want to lose money. This type of secure system could easily be leveraged, the same type of thing, to encourage voting in a secure fashion and an accurate fashion.
Right. And on Election Day, you're also going to save a lot of money there because you don't have to have a bunch of poll workers dragging out the voting machines to all the different polling places.
Exactly. You're setting me up. Great straight line, for the joke is that with all these Democrats in California that want to cut down on carbon emissions, that would take a lot of vans and buses off the road, wouldn't it? And everybody would be home pushing a button, and nobody would be going out with vans and unfortunately clogging up the sky with all that wonderful carbon footprint stuff.
This is exactly why it's not happening. It makes too much sense.
That's right. Again, probably what we were saying earlier rings true, is that when there's not a logical reason for it, certainly there's an emotional reason for it, there's a psychological reason for it, and in this case, certainly a political reason for it.
Michael Stollaire, thank you very much for joining me on the Jimmy Z Show today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure as always.
The Jimmy Z Show.